Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Engel. I am the inspection supervisor for the City of Frankfort. Our program today has been titled Framing 101. And through this program, we are going to show you some of the pitfalls that the contractors, the do-it-yourselfer, the homeowner, or whoever does when they are getting ready to do a project or they are doing a project. The first thing that I would like to take you through this morning is our permitting process. A lot of people come into our office wanting to get a building permit, and like everything else, you need to have some type of a plan in mind when you come into our office to apply for your permit. There are certain things that you will need to supply the office so we can look at your permit and get everything in line for you and make sure that everything you're wanting to do, you can do it. The first thing that we would need would be a set of drawings, and these do not have to be made by an architect or anything like that. It can be a very, very simple drawing, but there are things on that drawing that we do need you to put on there. One of those things is you need to measure the setbacks on your property to be sure that you are in compliance with the zoning regs for that particular area. And when I say setbacks, we need to know how far your project will be from the side property lines, from the back property lines, and in some cases, if you're doing a porch or an addition on the front, we need to know the setbacks of what it is from the street. Those are very important details that we have to be able to correctly go over your permit. Now, through the permitting process, the electrical inspector will also look at that to see whether or not there are electrical things that she needs to know, and those should also be on your drawing as to where you plan to put your outlets, your lights, switches, and different things like that. Also, the planners, which are looking at the setbacks, the zoning of your particular piece of property, and different things that has to deal with the zoning aspect of a building permit. Also, the Public Works Department will be reviewing your permit too, if you're going to put a drive or if you're going to put a sidewalk in that comes out to the street or whatever. Those are very, very, very important details that you need to supply to our office. And sometimes when people come down and apply for a permit, they don't have all of those things on there, and they get frustrated because their building permit is taking a little bit longer. If we have all of those details, we will know what you're wanting to do and we'll be able to help you through that. Now, also the building inspector, which is a very vital part of the program or the permitting process, will go over your permit, but he needs to know exactly what you're planning on building and how you're planning on doing that. We need to know what type of a footer, foundation, or whatever you're going to have, whether it's going to be built as a slab on grade or a monolithic pour, which is a footer and a slab together, or if it's going to be the standard footer, foundation, framing, and like that. The next thing he will need is he will need to know what type of material you're going to use and where you're going to put that stuff. One of the things that people get confused on sometimes is they undersize the lumber that they're wanting to do when it comes to ceiling joist and roof joist, and sometimes even floor joist. A 2x4 is not an acceptable piece of lumber for a roofing system or a ceiling system, and most certainly not for a flooring system, simply because it will not carry the load that it is intended to do. It will do for the walls, and it will do in other areas, but for those particular things, you do not need to use 2x4s. Now, if you're building, whether it's a slab on grade, monolithic pour, or a regular footer and foundation, you got to remember your structure has to be anchored to the foundation, slab, footer, whatever, and you have to use anchor bolts Those things are embedded into the concrete when it is poured, or if it is put into the block, it is put into one section of the block and completely concreted up, and you need to have about 4 inches of the anchor bolt sticking out. Now, that we're through the permitting process, I'm going to go over some common things that people overlook and they don't do when we come in as building inspectors on their first framing inspection. One of those is, the first thing that we look at is we look to see if the plumbing and the electric has been roughed in, and whether or not the plumbing inspector and the electrical inspector has come in there and approved the installation. If those two stickers are not on there, then we cannot do the framing inspection, because once we leave, if there is a problem with the electric or the plumbing, the plumber or the electrician may have to go in and cut some vital lumber in there that would alter the structural integrity of the building or structure, and we want to make sure that those things have not been compromised. That's the reason why that we look for those stickers on each and every one of those structures before we do our framing inspection, and it can be completed. The next thing that we look for in a framing inspection is what they call nail guards. Nail guards are pieces of metal that are put over the piping system for the plumbing, and also in certain areas that deals with the electric. And those guards are to make sure that when the drywall is being put up, that the nails, screws, or whatever they use to adhere this to does not go through your plumbing or your electrical system. And if those guards are not in place, they will cause you problems when they do your drywall work, and it's not a very pleasant thing to know that you've got a problem with your plumbing or electric, and you know that you're going to have to tear off the drywall till you find the area that has been penetrated with the screw or the nail. These nail guards are a very important thing. We have some pictures that we're going to put up on the screen of improper use of nail guards, and some where the 2x4s for the walls were cut out. There were no nail guards installed, and then there's some that the nail guards only cover part of the piping system, and it can cause serious problems when those things do not extend over the full cut for your plumbing or your electrical system. Another common mistake that is often overlooked, and one that we find more and more each time when we're doing a framing inspection, is that fire caulking has become a real big issue. If you watch the news all the time, you see all of these fires that are happening anymore. And with that, the state has passed that each opening inside a wall that goes either into the crawl space, the attic, or wherever it leads to has to be fire caulked. It doesn't take but just a very little bit of time and effort to seal off those areas. Those areas are used with the fire caulking to keep fire from spreading. So as you know, if you get a fire in a wall cavity, if it has no way of breathing, the fire will pretty much just take itself out because there's no air getting to it. If those penetrations have not been fire caulked, they will give the fire ample air, and it will spread. It will spread quickly. And we have some pictures of proper installation of the fire caulking. We have a couple of pictures also that are of areas that were not fire caulked, and as we went through it for our framing inspection, we had to turn those areas down simply because they were not caulked correctly. And some people think that regular latex caulking can be used as a fire caulk. That cannot be used as that. Insulation cannot be used. They make an industrial grade fire caulking. It is a little expensive, but a tube of that is well paid for itself. if you have a fire in your structure or whatever you are attempting to build. And some of these pictures that we have here also show several penetrations of electrical wiring and stuff like that is going through the walls up into the attic space that does not have any fire caulking at all. Those areas need to be gone back through, looked over before you call the building inspector for your framing inspection. If you have gas heat and you have a vent that goes through the ceiling or wherever it goes through the roof, that area is supposed to be fire caulked too, once again to alleviate the fire from spreading and getting air to breathe so that it does cause more damage in the structure where you are at. The next thing we want to take a look at is house wrap. You drive by a house that is being built or a structure that is going up and you see this white paper that is around the outside. Sometimes it says Tyvek, sometimes it says Lowe's, it'll say Lyons Lumber Company. There's several different types of house wrap out there. That wrap is designed as a moisture barrier to keep moisture from getting from the outside of the structure through the walls and getting to the inside of the structure that cause mold, mildew, and deterioration of the structural members of the structure. We have a picture here of a house that had a room addition on it, and they only put the house wrap up part of the way. The upper part of the structure did not have any house wrap on it. So needless to say, we as the building inspectors had to turn that down in order to make sure that the homeowner was protected and to be sure that it met the code requirements for having a continuous moisture barrier on the outside of the structure. The next area that we would like to look at is decks. Most people do their own decks around town anymore simply because things have got so high and the price of everything has just skyrocketed. And so if you are building a deck yourself and this is your first project, I want to caution you to be sure that you go down and talk to the building inspector before you attempt to start this project. Now, you go to a lumber company and tell them you're going to build a deck and you tell them what you're wanting to order or buy, they're going to sell you what you want. They're not going to give you the pitfalls or tell you what you've got is not going to be sufficient for what you're wanting to build. That's where your building inspector and the planning and zoning office comes into play to help you build a safe structure. With that said, I want to remind you all that the building code requirements that we work under here in the state of Kentucky, these are the very minimum requirements. They are not the highest standard and the most stringent. They are the minimum standards. So if you are building something or remodeling something and you do not have it to the minimum standards, your project at some time will fail. And we do not want you to go through that. We want to help you achieve what you are setting out to build, construct, remodel, or whatever. Now, back to decks. We have some pictures here of the correct way of installing deck posts. Deck posts are supposed to be a minimum of 2 foot into the ground, and they are to be surrounded by concrete from the bottom of that to the very top of the soil level there. That way it gives you plenty of room in there for your pole and the right amount of concrete to be around it, and so this deck and everything that it has will not fail. There are several pre-made things that you can buy at the local lumber company that tells you and shows you the correct depth and how to put it around your post and put it into the ground. If you will go by those things and adhere to their instructions, you will find out that it will be sufficient for what you are wanting to do. We have a few pictures here of some decks here that I'm going to, they're going to put up on the monitor there. And some of the most common mistakes that people make is that if a piece of lumber doesn't fit well, what you do is, instead of trying to correct it, you just put more nails into it. Well, that is not the answer. The picture that you will see here is of a deck that was done here in town. And I'd like to say that each one of these pictures are actually projects that we have been to, and they are not staged. These are things that we encounter all the time when we go out to a project. And this particular deck, as you can see by that picture, there is way too many nails on there. The building code gives you a nail requirement for each and every structure that you build, including decks. And we want you to be able to put your deck up safely and to be sure that it does not fail. The more nails that you put into something does not make it stronger. It oftentimes compromises the strength and the integrity of the particular member that you are nailing on. This particular deck also, the nailing pattern on it was the same on both sides, and it was way too much nailing at the top riser to attach it to the first step on the deck. The next common mistake that we see with decks is that people, instead of leveling up the ground and having a firm surface or pad for the bottom step to set on, they will just put a piece of lumber under there and just barely put it under there, just enough for part of the riser to set on it. Well, that will only last for a short period of time, and then you will have failure of those steps. And when the bottom step fails, the rest of the risers are going to fail also. So we do not encourage you to put it up that way. We can give you ideas and tips on what to do when you run into an area that is not flat and your steps do not come down to a flat surface. One other thing that we have encountered is that when you build a deck and you begin to plan it, you do not plan to put it over any type of utilities. Now, this particular deck that we are showing you the pictures of, at one point here, they have put the steps right over top of the sewer cleanout. Now, with that said, common sense would tell you if you ever have a sewer problem, you're going to have to take your steps up in order to be able to get to that cleanout. Do not put it over any type of utilities, your water line, your sewer line, your cable, anything. Those are protected areas, and when you are planning your project, if you have to adjust where your project is, then you need to adjust it to stay away from those particular type of downfalls that you will encounter. Also, things that we have encountered too for unlevel ground is that the contractor, the homeowner, the do-it-yourselfer, or whoever has done this particular project, they have drove a piece of treated wood, and actually it is a 2x4, down into the ground, and left enough of it sticking up that they could attach the stringer to that to make an offset for the ground being unlevel. Now, that also will fail. It will not hold up under time and pressure and usage of those steps. That 2x4, even though it is treated, when the ground thaws, when it freezes and thaws and it gets wet, that 2x4 is going to become sloshy in there, and before you know it, your steps are going to creel, and they once again are going to fail, and you're going to have a problem with those particular things. Another thing that we encounter with decks is that most people do not put joist hangers to support the floors on these decks. Now, with this particular deck that we will show you, if you take a close look, they have the joist hangers there, but they have installed them upside down. They have installed them on the top part to where it does not support anything at all. Those supports are made for a certain load limit, and that is to support the floor joists, plus the load that the deck is going to have on it, and you need those joist hangers for support. And we will show you another picture that has one post in the center of the steps at the very rear of it, and it is bolted in. That is not the correct installation for that type of circumstance. You need to have the support to be completely under the risers at the very top if you're going to use it as a support and not just support the stringer that the riser is going to attach to. Your building inspector will be able to give you the do's and don'ts and show you what you need to do when you run across this problem. We have another picture that is taken from one of the developments here in town that shows a support load problem. At the top of this was a two-story structure. At the top part, they had made a beam that was about 4 or 5 2x4s nailed together to do the support for the roofing system. When they come down the wall, at the first story, they only had 2 or 3 2x4s supporting that load. That is not a sufficient amount of support for that type of load. It's not distributed equally the way that it should be. What you have at the top should be exactly the same at the bottom when you are installing support and stuff like that on, especially a two-story structure. Another problem that we encounter getting to support is when you get under the house into the crawl space and you have your piers for your floor joist. Lumber is not acceptable as a buildup between the top block and the beam that you have got up for your flooring system. You have to use metal plating of some type. And these pictures that we have will show you that even with the wood that they've used, only part of the wood is actually supporting the main beam on this structure. And the block are not put in any kind of order. They're not straight, they are offset. And then to top it all off, they have a piece of wood that is just barely sitting on there supporting a supporting beam. That is not acceptable practice, and that particular type of installation will fail. And also, when you have a pier is designed to be in the center of whatever you are supporting. You cannot put a pier under there and then put a 4x4 post or something like that across that pier to support 3 or 4 floor joists. That will not support the load. It will cause problems, and once again, it will fail. And one other thing that we encounter is people that have problems on their flooring system in a crawl space. A lot of times they do not go in and take the rotted, the mildewed, the termite infested wood out. They want to put a 2x4 or a 2x10, 2x6, 2x8, whatever it is, alongside of that and use that as the support. Well, that in itself will not work. That will eventually fail because it has nothing to adhere to when you've got a piece of rotted material in that particular type of installation. Now, with all that said, we want to encourage you before you start your project, come down and talk to our office and we will help you achieve what you need to do. Thank you.